Wow, thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I am super excited to be here. I don't think that I've had this suit on since last February. And when I was getting my suit out last night and dusting it off, literally, I was just concerned that it was going to fit. Because like many of you, I put on a COVID-10, and so I'm kind of working through that right now. That's my own COVID impact story. But I do really want to thank all of you for being here this morning, getting up at this time of the day, getting out. This is probably one of the first live events that a lot of us have been to this year, certainly in probably almost a year. So you guys are the tip of the spear. You're the A-types. You're getting up at 6:30 to come in here, economic information. I mean, that is impressive, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys today to talk about the Broward County economy and really share the stage with Bob Dole, who I have so much respect for. He's just such a fantastic speaker. He has such a high global perspective that really helps. And so I think what the Executives Association wanted to do is just sort of tie it together to our local economy, which is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, Broward County is a very deep economy, and there's a lot to be proud of for those of us that work, exist, and succeed in this economy. So let's talk a little bit about that today. A few just quick disclaimers. As Dennis mentioned, I do exist in the commercial real estate space. That's the lane that I run in. And so everything that I view from an economic standpoint is through those lenses, through the commercial real estate lens. And so I do think that's, although I'm not an economist, I do believe that the lens that I view the economy through is helpful because it's such a huge industry here in Broward County. And it cuts across so many different industries. So just a quick disclaimer on that. Also, I'd like to give a special thank you to those of you in the audience and others in our organization that took time last year to write me a note or to send me a card or call me and just provide comment. It meant a lot to me. I really appreciate it. They say that the sequel is never as good as the first original. So today I'm under a lot of pressure, and I just want to let you guys know that I appreciate you working with me. Listen, our economy, certainly the national and global economy, it was ravaged this past year, and we were no different. We had a global pandemic, an economic recession. We had race wars this summer. We had a political election for the power of the universe, and it just was all of us were kind of getting whipsawed back and forth while all the politicians overplayed their hands, and it really took a toll on our national economy and certainly on our local economy, and we did sustain some damage, and that damage isn't done yet, but we did find also that we are a very resilient economy. We are doing a lot of things right, and this has given us an opportunity to sort of take a look at our own economy and say, how can we do it better? How can we be more economically sustainable, if you will? I put these two slides in, not that you have to read them, they're very small, but they are colorful. This is the state of Florida, and this is Broward County. And the reason I put these slides in here is I wanted you guys to be aware that they were available by the Florida Chamber of Commerce. So if you look at the website, it says thefloridascorecard.org. This program was funded originally by Wayne Huizenga. He put $1 million up to have this done, and so this is a repeatable, quality source of economic information. There's COVID information on there. It's put out, I think, monthly, obviously. Our very own Charlie Calkins, who's sitting right here in the audience, is the president of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. So Charlie, thank you very much for your service. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so these guys here that you see on the screen, they run our county. They're the county commission. We have a $5.4 billion budget. Our GDP, as you see, is about $100 billion a year. Our regional GDP, which is South Florida, Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach, is $345 billion. I mean, that's about the size economy of Panama, the Bahamas, and Jamaica all combined. I mean, it's just really, to me, it's impressive. We're second in the state in the economy and our GDP and population to Miami-Dade County. We're going to be second in most categories, but that's not a terrible thing. I mean, Florida is the 17th largest economy in the world. And we're the second largest economy in that state. So I think that's pretty impressive. We have a AAA credit rating, one of only 2 counties in the state that has a AAA credit rating. So we have a lot of good things going for us. And in many ways, we were well positioned to sustain the damage that we have sustained and we're going to continue to sustain for the next couple of years. Right off the bat, we all know we lost jobs. You know, if you look at the numbers on the screen, we've lost 75,000 jobs. We're down right now. You know, our overall unemployment rate here in the county is 6.6%. We're better than the state. We're better than the nation. Last year, as you can see, we were tight, 2.5%. I think I remember saying that one of our headwinds or one of our problems here with our local economy was that we couldn't find good skilled labor. Quality problem. Well, that's not as big a problem now, although I am hearing local businesses having trouble luring folks out of not working because they're getting paid more not to work, and so that's something we're going to have to work through. Our unemployment rate in April was 13.5%, so you know we have come down. And one thing I wanted to point out as well, that this virus, the way it impacted human beings differently, has impacted parts of our economy differently, and this virus has really impacted the lowest income earners in our county. The unemployment rate for the lowest income earners in our county earning less than $25,000 is almost 3 times our county average. So those folks in our service industry, leisure, hotels, restaurants have really, really been hurt. And so that's something that when we're moving forward, all of our leaders in our county need to sort of address how can we make sure that we backstop them, because they serve us, they wait on us, they're part of our huge tourism economy. And so it's really important that we figure that out. Small business, no doubt. All of us, or most of us in here, have a small business, deal with a small business, or a non-major corporation type of business. And there's no doubt about it, we have had our challenges this year. But there have been winners and losers. If you look at the confidence rate, you know, we're not quite as high as we were in August of 2018 at the peak. That was the good times. That was when the economy was really, really humming. Everyone was very confident. But by no means are we at the bottom. When you look at the recession in 2009 or 10, we were down at 80. So I think overall, the optimism in our small business community is mixed. You know, there are those of us that are struggling to get back on our feet. There are those of us that did very well last year. And it's really been one of those odd kind of things from an economic standpoint locally. Retail, I noticed Bill Rotella and his team are here. And Bill, if you don't know, Bill Rotella is one of the foremost retail experts in the state of Florida, if not the country. He's right here in Fort Lauderdale, right here in our organization. And you know, I think that the reports of retail Armageddon are slightly exaggerated. I know that there is disruption out there and there's a lot of change, and we all see that. We see that in our neighborhoods. We see that with small restaurants closing and chains closing. But I'm here to say that even though there is going to be some more pain this year in the retail market, that it's not as bad as people think. You know, that 10% bankruptcy, 10% of all centers in the country are bankrupt. That's it, just 10%. The occupancy rate, even though we've lost 50,000 tenants nationwide, has only dropped to 1 or 2%. In Florida, in over 200 open-air centers, that have lost an average of only 1 tenant. And I can tell you all the shopping centers that I've visited over the last year have done okay. There have been some rent concessions, there have been deferrals. If you have a ballet school or you have an Asian sushi buffet or a dance studio, you're going to have some problems. Anything that has to do with social distancing or spacing, and if you don't have a good balance sheet and you don't have a good brand and you don't have a strong e-commerce platform, this virus is going to flush you out. So we saw a little bit of that. But if you had a good business model, if you had an e-commerce program, if you were in the restaurant business and you had a drive-through, not only did you survive, you did well. So it was a real mixed bag. I feel there's going to be some shakeup in the retail industry this year, but I think there's pent-up demand. People want to get out. You look at the savings rate of 17%. Historically, savings rates are like 8 or 9%. This year, at one point, it was up to 33%. There's money coming from the feds. There's money not being spent because people are working home remotely. And so I just feel like from what I see and hear out there in our county and the numbers that I look at, that there is pent-up demand and folks are going to get out. Look at us. We want to get out. I mean, I had to dust this suit off this morning. I haven't been out in so long. I've been wearing pajamas since March. And so, I mean, like many of you, I'm ready to get out. And I think that starting with the younger folks who are less concerned and are more tolerant, they're going to creep out. And I just think that it's going to continue to build, and I hope I'm right. But that notwithstanding, I think you are definitely going to see some of the weaker retail centers, retail companies, retail tenants get flushed out this year. Happiness is New York City in your rearview mirror, right? So I think the big news in population this year, you know, we know the stats, right? We're number 2 in Florida. We've got about 2 million people here. We projected to have 2.4 million in 2030, so we're growing. That's over 100 people a day. But I think the one thing that everybody points to this year is the exodus of folks from pandemic-related situations from the Northeast to Florida. We hear it in the paper, we see it in the news. I think one concern that folks have is that why are these companies picking Miami, or why are they picking Palm Beach? What's going on here? And I do believe that one of the reasons they're picking Miami and Palm Beach is because they have a tremendously valuable housing stock. You can't get a $100 million residence here in Broward. You can't get a $40 million condo here in Broward. So, Dennis mentioned my political days, and I am a fully recovered politician, but I do remember knocking on doors and, somebody telling me, I'm not voting for you, I'm voting for this person. And I would say, well, then I'll be your second choice. If something happens to your first person, I'll be your second choice. And I think that's where we are in Broward County. I think we're in the middle. We're less costly. We have room to grow. So I think we're going to, once Palm Beach and Miami sort of fill in, we're going to fill in too. And I think that one of the advantages we have here in Broward County from our economy is that we're in the middle of South Florida. So I think our population is going to continue to grow, certainly a strength of ours. When you look at COVID winners and losers, I believe Florida, particularly South Florida, is a big COVID winner. So I think we're lucky in that regard. These are some of the metrics that we're going to take a look at today, and some of the sectors of our local economy. We're going to just take a quick look at how they did, what kind of damage they sustained, who were our shining stars, because we did have some shining stars. And so, as I said at the outset, the question that we can ask ourselves as stakeholders and business owners in the county and elected officials and everybody in between is, what did we learn? Are we economically sustainable? Where are our holes? Where are our gaps? How can we pivot? So we're going to just touch on these sections here one by one. Construction and real estate industries. First of all, let me just say I'd like to give a big shout out to the Construction Executives Association. Raise your hands. 6 tables. You guys are great. Thank you. The construction industry is the tip of the spear, and we really love you guys. We appreciate you. You can see you're a massive impact on our local economy. You're one of our bellwether industries, and by and large, the construction industry did very well in 2020, but there was a loss of jobs, about 5,000 jobs, and you can see we peeled back about 25% in terms of some of these projections. Real estate-wise, it's going to be a mixed bag. I think we all see and hear about the news about residential real estate. It's on fire. Liz Caldwell and her team, they're running out of inventory, and that's a problem, but it's a good quality problem. People are spreading out. They're moving to Florida. They're moving maybe to the burbs. Some of these trends that were occurring prior to COVID have accelerated a bit. And, if you've been cooped up in your house with nothing against mother-in-laws, but with your mother-in-law, with your grandma, 3 babies and 2 dogs, you want to spread out a little bit, And so I think some of that's happening right now. And, so that's good. I think that the values of residential housing are doing very, very well. And the burbs are experiencing a sort of a resurgence, and not just with residential real estate, but with retail and commercial real estate as well. I think, as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, the commercial real estate sector, we're going to have a mixed bag. If you drop a pebble in a pond, the stock market was jittered up in March, and, it sort of worked its way out. And I think next year you're going to see some real estate foreclosures, real estate defaults. The banks have done a great job. I saw Ginger Martin here and her team. The banks have done a great job in this cycle, being more prudent with their lending and more careful with their underwriting, but yet making capital available so that our economy can flow. And what they've done a great job at this year was working with their existing borrowers, working with their existing loans, rather than just flushing them out the drain, to try to work forward as a team and figure out how can we get you guys over the hump and make sure we are okay post-COVID. So that has been occurring, and I applaud the banks for that. But at some point, if a loan is non-performing, you've got to flush it out. And I think you're going to see that this year. Weaker locations, weaker brands, older brands. You're going to see hotels, some of them, are going to be foreclosed on. That's all part of a natural flushing out system. And while it has been painful and will be painful next year to some degree, I don't think that's the end of the world for us. I think we're going to be okay. I want to give credit to Lisa, my wife, who puts the images in these PowerPoints. She does such a great job with these, and let's give her a huge hand. She hates this. She hates it. She hates getting recognized and noticed, but we all know, those of us that know Lisa knows that she's a force and a dynamo, and she has a great eye for art, and I thought this was pretty cool. But listen, tourism is certainly our top job creator. It's a #1 priority for our county. we're diverse enough that we can work around it, but there's no doubt about it. We really need the tourism industry, and they were really, really hurt this year here in Florida, certainly around the country. But Broward County was no different. You can look at those numbers and you can see that there's been some dramatic increases. I think that our occupancy in March was 33%, so we're at 65 right now. There is some good news. We have 1,700 rooms in the pipeline over the next 3 years, so we are rolling out new product. Continue. A lot of it was put on the shelf, but I think that's healthy. I don't think we need to oversupply, and if it's not feasible, don't build it. We also have, from what I understand, 221,000 bookings. So there is some interest in getting back. And I think the other thing that gives Broward County a bit of an advantage, or at least allows us to crawl back into the realm of feasibility quicker, is that we are a drive-to location. And I think this summer, with the price of gas, with all the cars that have been purchased this year, Dennis, a lot of cars came into Port Everglades this year. We talked about that yesterday. I think you're going to see a lot of vacationers, pent-up demand. They want to get out, throw the kids in the car. We got 23% savings. Let's go spend it in Florida. And I'm hoping that that's going to be the case, followed by domestic travel, followed by business travel, followed by international travel. So I think that's the way it's going to go, and it's going to be all vaccine-driven. We talked earlier in presentation about some of our all-stars, some of our economic stars. Marine industry, you're looking at one of our all-stars. They have been a powerhouse this year. The marine industry is an unspoken or unknown powerhouse in general. I mean, $857 billion annual economic budget. That's like 2 Super Bowls every year, right here in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, I just don't think that can be said enough, and I don't think enough people know that. So much to the credit of the Marine Industries Association of South Florida, and I see Jimmy Harrison sitting back here, who's been the president of the association. Thank you for your service, Jimmy. And Informa, who's been an unbelievable owner of the rights to the boat show. They did a great job getting this show open in a really tough environment. We all know the environment that was. They did it safely. The attendance was only 80% this year of what it was last year, but that was somewhat by design. We didn't have the international travelers, and we didn't have the low-end, just sort of tire kickers. We had quality buyers at the boat show. The vibe was good, and most of the boat manufacturers and boat sales people tell me they had record boat shows this year. Sold record amount. Contenders sold 40 boats this year. Jimmy Harrison was telling me Neptune had a record sales year. So there was some really good things that came out of the boat show. It boosted our local businesses. All the hotels was their best occupancy since before COVID. The shops and stores up and down 17th Street and on Federal really benefited. It gave us a nice boost, and it sort of gave us, sort of a post-election encouragement into 2021. So I really want to give a lot of kudos to the marine industry. They really helped shoulder the load as we sort of struggle through this COVID recovery. Remember the underwear from last year? Remember we talked about that Port Everglades does $1 billion of imports a year, and our second biggest import behind petroleum, which, by the way, we import 38% of the state of Florida's petroleum right here in Port Everglades. Undergarments is our second biggest import. So like I mentioned last year, we love our undergarments in Broward County. But I was talking with Glenn Wiltshire, the Deputy Port Director, great guy, former Coast Guard, great Deputy Port Director. And he said that the textiles come down from North Carolina, and we put them in the port, we ship them over to Honduras and Guatemala and whatnot, and they make the undergarments and ship them back. And they pivoted, though. They pivoted to face masks this year. And so, the lesson here is I think you got to pivot. You got to know how to pivot. You got to know how to go from your underwear to your face mask. We're here to try to learn a little bit, too. And so, the North Carolina textile folks really got it down this year. They just slid right into that lane. So on a serious note, let's talk about Port Everglades. Another unsung hero in our economic recovery. No doubt they were gashed in the cruise passenger piece. There's no doubt about that. In a normal year, Port Everglades does 80,000 cruise passengers every week. Think about that. There's not 80,000 people that come to certain states in a year. And we have it every week, right here, flying in, flying out. So we're very lucky in that regard. But you can see from the numbers, they were way off this year in that regard. But the good news is Port Everglades has a nice mix of business lines. They've got cargo, petroleum, real estate, and cruise. So while cruise was down, and cruise is about 40% of our business, cruise was down, we had other revenue sources. And so it wasn't until we had no layoffs in the port. And not only that, the port is investing to sort of pivot more toward a cargo-related revenue source. We're not going to replace cruise, but we just want to be balanced and mixed. So we have a $471 million turning notch project going on in the port right now. It's 65% complete. Will be done in 2023. Will allow bigger ships to maneuver. Complementing that, we also, I say we because this is a taxpayer purchase, we also purchased $41 million for three large post-Panamax cranes and gantries to help service those ships. So Port Everglades did take a hit, is on the recovery. The cruise piece, Glenn Wilshire tells me that they don't expect a cruise till possibly July, and that could get pushed back. That's a very touch and go situation. So I think all of us in this room that rely on cruise passengers, cruise-related business, we're all watching that very closely and wishing for the best. But Port Everglades has done a very, very good job, and I want to compliment them. They really run the port very well. There's really no way to sugarcoat the performance at the airport. I mean, we have a really great airport. Top 18th, as you can see on the screen, in the country. And from 2017 to 18, we were the fastest growing airport in the country. I'm proud. One of the things when I was the mayor of Dania Beach, I was the final and approved vote for the South Runway, and it's been a fantastic thing for us here locally. So you can see the passenger travel is down, but you know, we are working our way back. The average annual monthly passenger travel at the airport is about 3 million, 3.5 million. This past December 2020, we were at 1,750,000, about halfway back. You know, you look at, in April, we had 100,000 passengers versus 3.5 million normally. I mean, it was desolate. Last December, you know, we had 1 million or 3.5 million. So 3.5 million last December, 1,750,000 now. So we're working our way back. And again, it's a COVID-related thing. Now they have done a lot of work at the airport, and that's good. And I know Mike Weymouth at the Riverside and the Los Olas companies did the same thing. If you're down, take the opportunity to fix your place up. Take care of those projects that you can't take care of when you have passengers 24 hours a day. So the airport did a really good job at that. We talked last year about the fact that when Amazon was looking for their headquarters for for H2Q, I think they called it, that South Florida was in the mix. And so we all kind of put our heads together and got on board with tech, and we kind of got recognized, and it sort of spurred a continued interest in nurturing and growing the tech industry here in South Florida, particularly Broward County. You know, like we do have some headwinds, as you can see on the screens. You know, we don't have a great national rating, and Miami is beating us on tech. You know, but again, we can be that second choice. We have room to grow. We have less costly real estate, and I really want to give 3 of our local agencies some really good props for what they're doing in the tech space. NSU and their Collaborative Science Research Center is amazing. That's opening up now. There'll be a lot of good research and science that comes out of that. A lot of tech. Marine Industries Association, doing a fantastic job branding and promoting the Marine Research Hub that sort of galvanizes all the research that's being done at all of our 6 universities down here in the marine space, which is unbelievable. Tying that into the boat show, getting these billionaires that come from all around the world exposed to this research, and tying that money to that research and growing that. So Marine Industries is doing a great job at that. And the Alliance is also doing a fantastic job with their tech gateway and with sort of pivoting now to remote working, telling folks out there, hey, if you can live anywhere in the world and work, why not live here? And so they've been working on that. So they're doing a great job. So tech is an industry that we're definitely going to continue to promote and take care of. It accelerated during COVID, and I think we should take this advantage to continue to grow it. I told you we're not going to do graphs. We're not going to do anything complicated. We're going to do pictures. Big winners in the COVID economy were pets. Pets, this was the best year of their life. We're home every day, we're in pajamas, we're on the couch drinking coffee. These guys just, this couldn't be better, right? Pet adoptions are up 40% this year. The pet industry is a $100 billion industry. They ran out of pets at many shelters, so I think that's a good news. COVID winners are definitely pet rescue. You know, it's funny, something about dogs and cats. You know, I tell folks back in my old political days in Dania that I had death threats and I had my garbage picked through and I had this happen to me, and they're listening, kind of half bored. And I say, and one of my supporters' dogs got poisoned. And they're like, what? A dog got poisoned? And I just, so it's something about animals that I think we can all relate to. But the pets have been a big, big winner here. So in closing, and this is what you paid the big bucks for, the forecast. So we're going to give you the forecast right now. And I want to say last year we were basically right. We called the black swan virus. We did that. And I asked Bob, please, Bob, the county's doing fine. Don't screw it up. Sure enough, black swan event, the whole thing's a mess. But I think this year is really just going to be a year of improving and healing in Broward County. There's going to be flushing out the weaker brands, flushing out the weaker companies. There's going to be some pain in real estate, and I think in the year following, you're going to see some pain in local government as some of the taxes and revenues from ad valorem taxes and from tourist tax, you're going to see those become a bit of a strain on our local economy, but nothing too terrible. I think that, like I mentioned a couple times, this recovery is going to be vaccine driven. When do corporations feel like they have the liability piece covered? When do we as individuals feel safe? I think those are the two nexus there that we're really paying attention to. There's going to continue to be a flight to quality, which is good for us because I believe Florida is a quality market. When you look around the globe, where can you put your money? Where are we pro-business? Where are we less taxing? Where's the real estate good? Where's there good appreciation? Florida checks a lot of those boxes. And unlike maybe 30 years ago when we had a bit of an issue in the institutional real estate investment community, we don't now. We are a targeted investment community location. So I think you're going to see that. And then at the end of the day, I really believe there's tremendous opportunity for us this year, for not only us as businesses and individuals, but as local government as well. I think we have a great opportunity to continue with our infrastructure projects, to pursue that bridge over the New River, to find a repeatable funding source for good quality workforce housing so that we have good places for our employees to live and those that serve us in the leisure industries, which is our top industry. And I think just leaving with a couple of headwinds, there is uncertainty out there, and I think a lot of the uncertainty is just from how are the new administration's economic policies going to play out, how are they going to affect us, and I think Bob's obviously going to tell us about that, and we can sort of connect the dots there. Herd immunity, when are we going to feel safe enough to go out? When are companies going to feel safe enough to get their companies back into their office buildings downtown? Right now we're at about 25% occupancy downtown. I hear some companies aren't coming back till November, so we've got to work on that. I do believe there are some bubble conditions out there. There are some overheated areas in the market, and I think Bob hopefully will touch on that today too. Some people have some concerns there. I feel like even though we're good here in Broward, and this is going to be a solid year, that there's a house of cards out there that just seems tenuous to me and others, and so that's, I think, a potential headwind. And then the final headwind is just that black swan event, the thing that we can't really predict. The virus from last year obviously was one. I think for me this year, I believe a potential black swan event would be if one of these countries that don't like us rattle their sabers. How do we react? How does the market react to that? If North Korea starts launching bombs again or nuclear missiles, those kind of things. I think those kind of things we're going to be paying attention to. But other than that, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning and your consideration. And leave you on such a good note. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Great job. Thank you. Yeah, well done. All right. Thank you very much, Walter. Great job as always. Very informative. I would like to now introduce our keynote speaker. Robert Dahl is a senior portfolio manager and chief equity strategist at Nuveen Asset Management. Bob manages 7 portfolios, including large caps and alternatives. He is a highly respected authority on the equities markets among investors, authorities, advisors, and the media. As the author of widely followed weekly commentaries and annual market predictions, Bob provides ongoing, timely market perspectives. Prior to joining Nuveen Asset Management, Bob held similar roles at other large asset management firms, including serving as chief equity strategist at BlackRock, president and chief investment officer of Merrill Lynch Investment Managers, and an investment officer of Oppenheimer Funds Incorporated. Without further ado, and backed by popular demand, I am pleased to welcome Mr. Bob Dahl.
Thanks, Nick. Good morning, everybody. I have not seen a crowd in person like this I suspect, Walter, since you last saw one too, right here. It's crazy. It's great to see you all here. There aren't a whole lot of states where this could happen, so thank you, Florida. You can clap. Yep. So to the organizers, when they called, I said, this is the third time. Aren't you getting tired of me? And one of them said, well, you said last year it was going to be bumpy, but we'd end up with a good year in the stock market. You got it right. And another one said, we're going to have you back until you get it right. So we're going to give it a try. I do have my 10 predictions for this year as a typical way where we talk about the environment in which we find ourselves, moving from the great job Walter did on here. I want to broaden that now and talk about mostly the U.S. I'll touch on some global things. To refresh your memory from the introduction, I'm a portfolio manager. I'm not an economist either. I invest in the stock market for clients and mutual funds and separate accounts. And when you do that, you have to care about things macro and things economic. And so we do just that very thing. So I do have one slide of history. I will never forget, as long as I live, how the consensus expectation for global GDP, the broadest measure of the economy of the world, in early March last year was plus 3%. And 6 weeks later, it was minus 3%. That 6% swing is the biggest swing in history, by far, over any time period, let alone a little more than a month. As the caption says, the unanticipated coronavirus crisis changed everything. And through December 31st, you see on the right some of the carnage that occurred, and some of you know that tangentially from your business, personally. It's touched all of us and continues to touch all of us in lots of ways. I do these 10 predictions every year, been doing them now for over 30 years, and last year is the first year I issued a second set. When this coronavirus hit and everything changed, I said to my colleagues in April, if we're going to be helpful to investors, we got to give them something that makes sense. So we did come out with a second set. Now, our grader, who evaluates us every year, evaluated us on the January 1st ones appropriately, and we didn't do so great. I hope there's no black swan this year nor do I hope I ever have to issue a second set again. So with that in view, here's my introductory slide, and as Walter talked about the lens through which he views the world, I view through the lens of the U.S. stock market. I think this is going to be a great year for the economy and earnings, and a good year for the stock market. I distinguish between those two words deliberately. The great year comes from an amazing economic recovery that is in our future. Thank you, vaccines. There are going to eventually be a lot of meetings like this. As Walter said, which one of us doesn't want to go out? Who doesn't want to go out for dinner somewhere? Or who doesn't want to get on an airplane and go to your favorite vacation spot? Now, the vaccines are rolling out. It's not going to be a straight line. We've already seen that. There are bumps along the way, but we're making good progress. And that light at the end of the tunnel will cause people to have more confidence and spend some money. Americans last year accumulated $1.5 trillion of excess savings. Savings above and beyond what they normally put aside. How did that happen? 3 ways. 1, the government mailed them some checks. 2, there are a bunch of people, I suspect some of you type A's are in this category, you wanted to spend money doing some things, but the things you wanted to do were closed and you couldn't do it. And then there's a whole nother set, number 3, of people who were just too scared. They did stay home in their pajamas under the covers because it was too unsafe to come out. And so they didn't spend money. $1.5 trillion. Now, economists differ on how much of that's going to get spent, but you just spend a small piece of that $1.5 trillion, and that's massive backing for the U.S. economy. and that will lead to strong earnings growth. Why a good year for the stock market rather than great? Accompanying the decent, better than decent, economic and earnings growth this year will likely come some modestly higher inflation and interest rates. And that'll just put a lid on the stock market. It won't prevent it from going up. I just think stocks will go up, but less than earnings. The numbers you see here, don't take them with anything more than 5 grains of salt. I mean, they're just guesses. In fact, when we made these in mid-December to get ready for our year-end release, we did not know the Republicans would win, the Democrats would win both Georgia Senate seats, giving them a majority in the Senate. And what that did, among other things, was take the probability of yet another stimulus package from 10 to 20% up to 70 or 80%, and now it's almost a foregone conclusion. Debate, is it going to be 1.9 trillion as the president's asked for, or watered down to only 1.5 trillion? And that means that the economy and earnings are going to be even stronger. $1.5 trillion of aid and stimulus is worth almost 2 points of GDP, and therefore more earnings growth. So long and short of it is, we guessed in mid-December earnings would be up 21% this year. My guess is they're going to be up between 25 and 30% this year. Indeed, a very strong earnings year. And I'm guessing stocks are going to be up kind of half of what earnings are because of this modest pressure on interest rates and inflation to the upside. I'll put some numbers on that in a minute. In fact, you can see on the right-hand half of the slide, if you're close to the stock market, you know what I'm talking about. Valuations are not cheap. As of year-end, the stock market was selling in the 96th percentile of valuation as measured by price-earnings ratio. Doesn't mean it has to go down, but typically when inflation and interest rates move up a little bit, P's move down a little bit. So I think the valuation on the stock market at the end of the year will be lower than where it was, but on much higher earnings and therefore not market. That's sort of, I'm tempted to say, give the benediction, say amen, and ask if there are any questions, but let me fill in some of the details with these 10 predictions, which hopefully are consistent with what I've just said. The first of which does deal with the U.S. economy. It is that the U.S. real GDP increases at its fastest pace in 20 years. Now, again, we made this in mid-December. If I had to make this prediction today, I would say the U.S. real GDP increases at its fastest rate in 36 years. We are likely to have the strongest economy in the United States in 36 years. And don't think I'm some wild optimist. I'm not. The reason we said 20 years, if you see in the fine print on the left, consensus coming into the year was economic growth would be 3.8. We were guessing 4 plus, and that would take us all the way back to the year 2000. But we're going to exceed that. Economic growth this year, real GDP in the U.S., is probably going to be north of 5%, maybe north of 6%, depending how fast the vaccines come out. In fact, on the right-hand half of this slide, you can see that we're going to achieve a new high in GDP by the middle of this year. When we made this slide, we said third quarter. Frankly, I think it's probably going to be the second quarter. That is to say, we will have erased the entire recession, recovered all of it. Now, that doesn't mean every industry is back to where it was. There's still some industries, again, Walter touched on it very well, that are in deep doo-doo. Travel, leisure, entertainment, etc. are struggling. But there are other industries that have had a huge tailwind from COVID. Technology, healthcare, home building, online retailing. Those 4 industries employ triple the number of people that are employed in travel, leisure, and entertainment. So ironically, COVID has helped more businesses than it has hurt. Crazy stuff. Now, why will the economy do so well? I give you 10 reasons here. I won't insult your intelligence by reading them, but just let me touch on a few. Most of you that studied economics know that policy, monetary, the Fed, the central bank, and fiscal, the Congress, signed by the president, operate on an economy with a lag. So things they do today may not affect the economy for 3, 6, 12 months from now. And there's so much stimulus in the system that's going to give us a tailwind, even if the Fed and the fiscal guys, take a vacation for the rest of the year. Very low interest rates. Who would have thunk it that before this recession was over, which was one of the deepest and one of the briefest in U.S. history, before it was over, we would be in a housing boom. Thanks to low interest rates, financing activity, et cetera, et cetera. And so the list goes. Number 7, improved productivity. Lots of people, lots of businesses during COVID took time to invest in productivity enhancement devices, technology of all sizes, shapes, and forms. And improved productivity adds to economic growth. And so the list goes. Prediction 2. Inflation approaches 2% as the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield reaches 1.5%. Those two numbers, 2 for inflation, 1.5 for the 10-year Treasury, are consensus numbers for next year. In other words, we think inflation and interest rates, while still low, will move up faster than most people think. In fact, on this slide, courtesy of Strategic Research Partners, as of the start of the year, these were the consensus expectations for the 10-year Treasury yield. Precious few of us at 1.5 or higher. The consensus was 1.2% coming into the year. We ended the year, 10-year Treasuries, at 93 basis points. This morning, they're at 124. They're already higher than what the consensus thought on December 31st. Interest rates are going up. Well, they're still going to be low, and it's not going to be a straight line. It's not going to go up at the pace it has from December 31 till today, but the direction is up. The debate is pace. Again, why higher inflation and interest rates? This time I give you 15 reasons. Same caveat, I won't insult your intelligence by reading them all, but let me touch on a few. How about the Central Bank of the United States, the Fed? It used to be that the Fed said we will tolerate a peak inflation rate of 2%. Now they're saying we would like to see inflation average 2%. So in other words, if it's 1 for a while, it's got to be 3 for a while to average 2. The Fed is asking for, inviting, stimulating higher inflation. You know what? Their wish at some point is going to come true. How about number 6? Those of you who follow the stock market, you know that the behavior of cyclical stocks versus defensive stocks is one of the few lead indicators and predictors of inflation and interest rates. And of late, cyclical stocks have done a lot better than defensive stocks. Ergo, inflation and interest rates are going to move up some. Now, at 2% Treasury yield and 2% inflation, 1.5% Treasury yield, they're still low relative to our history. Make no mistake about it. But if you owned a 10-year Treasury on January 1st, yielding 93 basis points, you're losing money this year. Other than the very short end of the maturity curve, out the curve, you're underwater. Why? Because interest rates have crept higher. You remember, this is the way I remember it. I'm a stock guy. I can't do bonds. When interest rates go up, bond prices go down, and vice versa. That's all you need to know, right? Number 12, if the government's going to spend trillions of dollars, they're going to have to get somebody to buy the paper, right? May have to offer a few more basis points to entice people to buy the paper, and so it goes. Number 3, this is consensus. The U.S. dollar sinks to a 5-year low. Macroeconomic imbalances within our country, specifically the rise in the current account deficit and the fall in the net national savings rate, are ganging up to create some pressure on the U.S. dollar. Let me step back and make some broader comments that underscore, yes, this prediction, but all of them. Let me take you back to last March. We turned the economy off, right? And when we turned the economy off, it got a flat tire. I don't know about you, I've had some flat tires in my life, and when you get a flat tire, what do? You have to reflate the tire. Put air in it, right? Same thing. When we turned the economy off, the authorities said, we have to reflate this economy. We have to throw money at it. Central bank, not just in the US, all around the world, and the fiscal authorities, the ruling bodies that pass that kind of legislation. To reflate, to put air back into the economy, as it were. Now, when they did that with the trillions, the first place that liquidity always goes is the easiest place, the financial markets. I mean, why do you think last year bonds went straight up and interest rates went straight down? Why did you think we saw a 37 basis point 10-year Treasury yield? The answer is there was all kinds of money floating around. Why do you think the stock market went straight up, even as earnings were collapsing? People, how do you explain this? It's all about liquidity and reflation. Money thrown at the system. That's the first place it always goes. The goal of the policymakers is not that. The goal is to reflate the real economy. And usually and eventually, with lags that are unpredictable, it gets there. And it's getting there now. And that's likely to give us this strong economic growth pattern that I mentioned in the months to come. Now, all of that, to step back and remind you, the United States is the most defensive economy and the most defensive stock market in the world. We have the fewest cyclical industries. We have a lot of growth industries, more than other countries. As a result, when economic growth is mediocre, not so good, or worse, which has been most of the last decade. There were a couple of years that were an exception, but by and large, the last decade, the economy disappointed. When that happens, guess who wins? The most defensive economy in the world. That's why our economy, our currency, and our stock market outperform the rest of the world. If you accept this reflation story that I'm trying to sing, what's going to happen is economic growth's going to lift. And guess who's going to benefit? Not the most defensive economy in the world. We'll be fine. We'll do well. But the baton is slowly being passed to many other economies, currencies, back to this prediction, and stock markets. I'll have more to say about that in a few minutes. Reflation. Prediction 4. Stocks reach a new high for the 12th consecutive year, but fail to keep pace with strong earnings growth. And I've already hinted that in my summary slide. We've already made a new high. What you see in these blue bars is the intra-year high for the S&P 500, and we've already, for the 12th year in a row, made a new high. Unprecedented, never happened before. But stocks fail to keep pace with strong earnings growth because of the modestly higher interest rates and inflation that I talked about. The middle of the slide, you see 21% earnings growth, as I referenced earlier. Well, how did we get there? Answer, you see high single-digit revenue growth, which is strong for an economy as mature as the United States. A whopping 12% of that coming from margin improvement, profit margin improvement. And 1% from share buybacks, as those buybacks are coming back in slow but noticeable ways. That got us to 21. To repeat, I'm guessing up 25 to 30, given the $1.5 to $1.9 trillion package. And yet another one, by the way. Once this one gets done, which is probably going to next month or so, maybe sooner, the Biden administration will immediately move to a longer-term package. And that will include some green. It will include some aid to businesses and communities and poor people. It will include some tax increases. And I'll give you some specifics when I get to the political prediction. But we have more stimulus coming, is the point. Our target for the S&P 500 coming into the year was 3950. The rate we're going to be there by next Tuesday. Maybe the following Tuesday. You get the point. Let me comment on valuations. Because stock market is not cheap, as I showed you earlier. Most of you know that, whether you're close to the stock market or not. There are at least two ways to look at the valuation of the stock market. How expensive is it? One is to look at it historically or absolutely, and that's what the majority of this slide does. You see their price forward PE, we're in the 96th percentile. That's the graph I shared with you at the front. If you look at the cash flow yield, we're in the 93rd percentile. If you look at the capitalization of the stock market divided by the size of our economy, we're in the 100th percentile. Stocks are rarely this expensive. But as interesting as that all is, it's implying I have a choice. I don't want to buy stocks today. They're too expensive. I'll buy them a decade ago when they were selling at much cheaper prices. You can't do that. Either buy stocks today or put your money somewhere else. And of course, then the question is not absolute valuation. It's relative to other things. In the bottom two rows, I show you that. Stocks compared to treasuries, stocks compared to investment-grade bonds. And when you look at it that way, stocks are not all that expensive. And I think both perspectives are worth paying attention to, but many people miss that second perspective. Number 5, hopefully consistent with all I've said so far, this is an asset mix prediction. It is when the year is said and done, the order of finish will be stocks first, cash second, bonds third, especially treasury bonds. Now, for that to happen, for stocks to be cash, stocks just have to actually end the year where they started, because the yield on the stock market is higher than the yield on cash. Now, we expect more from the stock market than that, as already indicated. And for cash to be bonds, the only thing that has to happen is interest rates move up a tick or two, which they actually did on the opening trade on the first Monday of the new year. And so we think that will be the order of finish. If it is, it'll be the first year in 8 that we had that order. Number 6. Now, these next couple are getting inside the stock market, so I apologize to those who are not as interested, perhaps, in those sorts of things, but allow me, because I know there are a bunch in the room who are. As interesting as the economy and earnings and the stock market are, what's more interesting is what's happening inside the markets. And to make that point, I show on this slide a period chosen from around Labor Day of last year to around Thanksgiving, a nearly 3-month period. Why did I pick this period? I picked it because if you look at 2/3 of the way down the line, the S&P 500 was identically unchanged, 0. It went up, down, sideways, and ended up right where it was 3 months earlier. But look what happened inside the stock market during that time frame. High beta stocks up 20%. Look up and down that list. Japan, financial stocks up, call it 10% to use a round number. Now, if something's up and the stock market's unchanged, something has to be down. And of course, that's the bottom. The largest sector in the U.S. stock market down 5.5%, the NASDAQ down 4%, Treasury bonds down 3%. So what's happening inside the markets in an environment where stocks are unlikely to go straight up every day is probably pretty important for making investment decisions. Now, with that intro to this prediction, let me back up and show you the bottom row here, the last 10 years. Most of you know, especially if you're an investor at all, and in the last 10 years, growth stocks have cleaned the clock of value stocks. Big stocks have trounced small stocks. And the U.S. stock market has way outperformed most of the rest of the world. Why did that all happen? Answer my little reflation story. Economic growth was okay. It wasn't great. Guess what benefits when economic growth's just okay? Growth, big U.S. at the expense of the opposite. Our view with this reflation story is we are in the process of passing that baton. Now, I am not saying run out and sell all your U.S. large cap growth stocks. I'm just saying make sure you complement it with the other side of those 3 stories, if you will. It's going to be more balanced, already is. A lot of these things started to come in life toward the end of last year. Number 7, favorite sectors of the 11 in the stock market for us are healthcare and financials. Healthcare stocks are what we call a GARPy group, growth at a reasonable price. So you got some growth and some value. You got some US, you got some global. You got a little of everything, some big, some small. Healthcare is a high-quality industry. There are parts of it that are in secular demand as we age and spend more money per capita on healthcare. Stocks are not all that expensive. The biggest risk to the sector is the government mucking around with healthcare prices, with drug prices. Not out of the question. We got to keep our eye on that part of it. Our favorite cyclical sector are the financials. Financial stocks lag the market abysmally. It seemed like forever. Until toward the end of last year, they began to come to life. We think there's more there as a function of the economy doing a bit better, meaning loan growth picks up some. Net interest margins benefit the financial sector as the yield curve steepens, long rates move up some, and the stocks are pretty inexpensive. Number 8. I think my colleague Ray Olson will attest to this. Probably the most common question I've gotten in the last 5+ years is, Bob, what about the debt and the deficits? Aren't they going to kill us? And my response has been pretty consistent. These do matter. We are borrowing from the future, but at the moment it does not yet, capital Y-E-T, matter. Let me try to tell you why. First, an observation on this slide. Federal debt held by the public as a percentage of GDP will cross 100% this year. We've had that level only once before in U.S. history, and that was, as you can see, post-World War II. And then we grew our way out of it. Unlikely we'll grow our way out of it this time, and the projections are not pretty. So why doesn't it matter yet? Answer is the black line on this slide. As fast as the debt and the deficit has gone up, interest rates have come down faster, such that interest expense, the amount it requires to service our debt, has actually fallen as a percentage of our economy, as a percentage of the budget, as a percentage of just about everything. This is why nobody's paying attention to it. I don't want to sweep it under the rug. We can't. This is a big deal, and it eventually will bite us, but not yet. And you might say, well, then when? The answer is when debt and the deficits are going like that, and interest rates are going like this. Yeah, we're calling for a higher interest rate this year, but 2%, 1.5% for inflation, 1.5 10-year treasury, that's hardly high interest rates. It's going to take some more time. I wish we would pay attention to it because we are mortgaging our future. Number 9. In case you've missed it, there's a war going on. It's a Cold War, the U.S. and China. Do not minimize this in your thinking, in your reading, in your concern, in your prayers. The Cold War between our two countries continues, but our prediction is the conversation becomes a little quieter and more multilateral this year. President Trump attacked this unilaterally. President Biden has says he will do it multilaterally. He's going to get our allies, hope to get our allies on the same page so we can kind of tackle conversations with China on a broader basis. Unilateral, multilateral, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. This is a big deal, and it's going to be around for a while. Why? I believe China remains by far the number one national security threat to the United States. Beijing has stated uncategorically in numerous ways, privately and publicly, that they are going to become the number one country in the world, economically, technologically, and militarily. Needless to say, if you look at most things, you'll find that we happen to be at the moment number one in those 3 areas, but they're knocking on our door. We have got to tackle this. I don't have a recipe, I don't have a formula, I am making it a prediction because I think it's a big deal for the investment markets. Do not underestimate the issues we have with China. Finally, number 10 is always a political prediction. Since we don't have an election this year of national consequence, it's about legislation. And it goes, despite polarization, And I could preach a sermon on that. I think you all could preach it too. Boy, do we have polarization. Despite it, we think President Biden, Mitch McConnell, and some moderate voices will come together and give us some compromise legislation. Some of you are saying, this guy is a cockeyed optimist, and you might be right. But hear me out. Firstly, I believe because the Senate is about 50-50 and the House is about 50-50, that the moderate voices in both chambers have huge influence into what happens. I mean, think about the $900 billion package that was signed in the lame duck session in late December. That was dead several times. Remember, it took months to happen? Who brought that back to life? Answer, the moderates. There were 6 moderate senators from both parties and about 50 House members who came together and said, we got to get this thing up and running again. My second point in hoping for some compromise legislation is to remember that Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell are good friends. They spent decades in the Senate together. Senator McConnell was the only Republican senator to attend the funeral of Joe Biden's son, personally invited by Joe Biden. I'm hoping we're going to hear that these two guys have breakfast, lunch, and dinner on occasion, just the two of them. Because you know what's going to happen. Mitch will say, Mr. President, if you would only boom, bada boom, bada boom, I might be able to bring my caucus along. And it'll be the other way around. Joe will say to Mitch, you know, what is it you guys need for us to get this piece through? And they'll have some conversations. Now, what are the possibilities? I've listed 10 items in the left-hand column here. I said the probability 1 in 3 chance for each. Some of them are more than 50-50, like the first one. Some of them are probably only 1 in 10. So I don't know which ones or when. We're going to get another fiscal stimulus package. We're probably going to get some infrastructure legislation. We're probably going to get a tax increase. If you are a high income or a high wealth American or corporation that pays very low tax rates, you should expect your taxes are going to go up. I'm not saying I'm endorsing that. I'm just giving you the facts. What is unlikely to happen is what scared the market twice before the election in November. Do you remember last September, the stock market got smacked hard? And even the week before the election last November, the stock market that week was down 7%. It was fearful of a big blue wave. As the polls at the time were saying, Joe Biden would win the presidency, which of course he did. Well, some are contesting that, but let's assume he's the president for the next, well, some are saying not 4 years either, but that's a whole nother story. I am going to leave a few minutes for Q&A. The prediction in the Senate was the Democrats, we would wake up the day after the election or a couple days later, and they would have 54 seats. That was consensus. They have 50. The prediction in the House is the Democrats were going to gain 10 to 15 seats. The Republicans gained 12 seats. So it was a 25-seat swing from the projections. Remember, the Democratic platform called for $4 trillion of new taxes and $6 trillion of new spending. We're going to get some more taxes and we're going to get some more spending, but not 4 and 6 because of the outcome of the election. So the right-hand half, unlikely, sorry, if this is what you want or you voted for. The left-hand half, a little bit more compromise. So I've got 3 or 4 slides left, and yes, we will have time for a few questions. Let me just go down this list. I hope it's clear and consistent, but you're right, Walter, this slide keeps coming and going, but I'm going to try. The cyclical economic and earnings outlook has improved markedly. But number 2, it's dependent on acceptable vaccine rollout. So far, so pretty much good. Number 3, inflation and interest rates are going up. The debate is not direction, debate is pace. 4, the stock market is likely to be up this year, but probably less than earnings. 5, within fixed income, credit and spread products along with municipals, if your tax considerations merit that, should outperform treasuries and sovereigns. You probably know the high yield market is now under 4% yield, the lowest in history. 6, the path of least resistance to the dollar, down. Oversold and in a bounce currently, but going back down in our view. 7, commodity prices heading irregularly higher. I have a preference for industrial commodities over precious, but I like them both. Caveat, they're both kind of up on flagpoles and due for rest and could have a sell-off, but I think in a reflationary world you need to have some if it fits your portfolio. 8, because of its size and growth rate, China is by far the most important driver of global growth. 9, my biggest intermediate concern is that the policymakers overstay their welcome in this reflationary story and invite an unwanted inflation. And number 10, sadly, because markets have high starting valuations, stocks and bonds, that future returns are going to be far more muted than past returns. Translation, in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think we're going to earn in our portfolios what we earned in the last 5 and 10 years. I've touched on most of these risks. I'll leave that to another time. So what do you do? Well, it depends if you agree or not. Again, I'm not addressing you as business folk. I'm addressing you as investors. If you agree with what I've said, longer term, expect lower returns. Focus more on alpha, less on beta. That is more what's in the asset class you own, not the asset class itself. 3, within equities, have more higher quality value, less expensive growth. Diversification, which we all profess is a great thing to do. In the last decade, it's only been mediocre in helping portfolios. I think it's probably in its heyday now. 5, focus on earnings and cash flow, not on higher valuations. 6, keep an eagle eye on inflation. And 7, consider some absolute return strategy products to complement your more conventional market exposures. Final slide. COVID and all the trends. There are 3 secular trends, I would argue, that were in place prior to coronavirus, accelerated during COVID, and will continue long after you and I remember how to spell coronavirus. They are deglobalization, digitization, and online shopping. Massive secular bull markets. Everything else to me is up for grabs. And my point of reference is to take you back to 9/11. After 9/11, the consensus wisdom, articles, books, speeches, was that the world was changed permanently. And yeah, a few things did change. I don't know about you, but you can't go to the airport 30 minutes before your flight and expect to make it like you did before 9/11. That has changed. But most other things within 2-3 years reverted back to normal. I think the same thing's going to happen here. I hope in my lifetime, because I hope I'm around for a while, I hope you'll invite me back someday and there'll be 10 at the table again. It might not be next year, but things are going to drift back. I'm going to exaggerate to make the point. Not everybody's going to work from home and never go back to the office. Urban centers will have people actually moving into them, not just everybody's leaving the cities. It will take some time, because you know what? Our memories fade fast. Coronavirus has changed things immensely in the short term, but I think our long-term future, despite some of the issues both Walter and I put on the table, is pretty bright. Let me stop there. We've got a few minutes for questions. I've got some lights on me, so it's kind of hard to... Oh, we do have a microphone here. If you have it, raise your hand, and we'll bring you a microphone. And if I can't answer it, I hope Walter's still here. He can answer it.
Where do you see the $15 minimum wage going and all that affecting the economy?
Yeah, of the Biden administration is trying to push this $1.9 trillion package fast. They'd like to get it done in the next 2 weeks. I don't think it will get done in the next 2 weeks if the 15 minimum wage stays there. The moderates, the poster child is Joe Manchin of West Virginia. He come out, and he's not the only one to say, I just can't support that. In my state, it's 11. To me, there's a whole lot more merit to minimum wage at the local level. Every community is different. And to say we've got one national rate, I think just misses the point. So might there be a raise in the national minimum wage? Possible, but I don't think it's going to make it to 15. And I might add, without trying to sound political, I've read the studies on both sides. If we do go to 15, our unemployment rate will go up. Too many businesses can't afford a $15 million minimum wage to operate, and they'll resort to other things, faster development of technology, replace labor with robots, et cetera.
Does when you think about globalization and the stocks that exist in the U.S., aren't most of our big cap companies global in nature, that they'll benefit from the cyclical nature of the global economy?
Absolutely, good point to make up. I'm a U.S. large cap portfolio manager. I can't buy in my portfolios, because I don't know enough about them, non-U.S. stocks. So we're focused on the multinationals. What are those companies that we think will benefit from pickup in overseas growth? Absolutely. So you can certainly tackle that part of what I said by owning U.S. multinationals. More direct plays by going to those markets, and the currency variable also can make a big difference for those markets versus the U.S. Other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
If you're tied to healthcare and the service provision is such a big part of that, as it is secularizing with telehealth and so forth, how is that affecting service provision and pharma?
It's affecting it slowly but surely. We have healthcare in the United States is a huge portion of our GDP, as you undoubtedly know, higher than many other countries. We just have to get more efficient at it, and I think the kind of thing you're talking about should help that to happen. Wherever you are in healthcare or in any industry, you can't just sit back and be fat, dumb, and happy because some competitor will come along and do it in a better way and take your business away from you. And what you're getting at is that service provision. We like the healthcare service companies, the HMOs, and the like, but their business is changing. It has to change. Good point. Thanks for bringing it up.
Good morning, Bob. This is Rick Ladd. I just want to thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. With the increase of popularity of cyber currency, does that indicate cracks in the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency? What's your read on that?
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer, but I have some speculation. First of all, I didn't comment on the fact that there are little bubbles here and there. I didn't comment on it because I don't think it's pervasive. I'll get to your specific question, but a lot of people want to try compare the technology sector today to the technology sector before the bubble burst in the year 2000. Those of you who were around then in the markets, in those days we didn't talk about the PE ratio or price to sales of technology companies. We talked about price to eyeballs and price to clicks. Because they didn't have earnings, and a lot of them didn't have revenues. That's not the case today. While some of those stocks are extended and expensive, and there are little pockets of speculation, and the GameStop thing is all part of that. And to your question, some of that's the same as well. When you essentially have free money, interest rate zero, when the government's mailing you checks, more people got checks that had no change in their salary than those who did have a change in their salary or lost their job. I got two daughters. They've worked. They don't make much money, so they were way under the thresholds. They got checks along the way, but they didn't lose any work. They shouldn't have gotten those checks, in my opinion. They're not here to stone me. We need to direct the help where it is. But my point is, when you mail those free checks and interest rates are zero and commissions are free, what do you expect? People have time on their hands and they go, let's go to the stock market. GameStop, look at that short interest. I'll bet we could drive it up and have a field day. And they did. By the way, there are a bunch of individuals who made a lot of money on GameStop. A lot of people, individuals who lost money in GameStop. There are a lot of hedge funds who made a lot of money in GameStop, and there are a lot of hedge funds who lost a lot of money in GameStop. So this, political class warfare thing totally misses it. The analysis was not done if that's the conclusion. That may be an attempt at the front end, but it didn't work out that way. To your question, I've used a phrase for many years now. I'm going to use it again. The dollar will continue to limp across the finish line as the reserve currency of the world. The limp across means we're really not doing anything to protect it or to earn it. We are blessed with, one of the huge blessings the U.S. doesn't get nearly enough attention is that we are the reserve currency of the world. You can get away with a whole lot more when you're the reserve currency of the world than when you can't. I mean, who's going to take the mantle if it's not the euro? That's an experiment a lot of people say is still failing. The Japanese yen with their secular decline, the Chinese yuan is just not broad enough and deep enough to maintain that. Yes, crypto has a place. Crypto technology is legitimate. I think it's still a little early to know who the long-term winners and losers are going to be, although I wish I owned some Bitcoin. And so I think as long as most of us are alive, the dollar will remain the reserve currency of the world. It will be challenged from time to time. Our size, our depth, our breadth keeps us in that enviable spot. Let's hope we don't fritter it away. Thank you for the good question, and sorry for all the extra information in my answer. Anybody else? Before I turn this back to Nick. Yes, I hear him. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Bob, over here. Craig Tanner, Print Basics. I know you talked about the $1.5 trillion in additional savings, but a lot of people talk about this future for foreclosure implosion, and I'm curious when you see the government starting to release a lot of these people to get foreclosed on, and how it might affect the market, and when you see it coming.
I think the government will, for as long as it can, not step on toes. I mean, the line used by both the past president and the current president is something like, these people didn't cause this problem, therefore we're not going to make them pay for it. As long as the eye can see, zero interest rates, aid packages is not the last aid package we're going to get. So I don't think the government's going to do these massive foreclosures that people are worried about till people can get back on their own feet and unemployment comes down some more, and some of these deep recession / depression industries have a chance to come back. So I think the government will provide a longer than we might expect safety net.
Good morning. Do you think this administration will tackle or address the role of social media and the big tech companies?
They will talk about it and probably not do much. The biggest donor to the Democratic Party is technology, by far. And I think because of the politics of it, they will have days when they say, you technology people, you've been really nasty, but I don't think there'll be teeth behind anything of note. As an investor, my guess is that puts a bit of a lid on the valuation of these companies, but I don't think their business models are going to change all that much. I forgot what month it was, but sometime last summer, I think, some of you remember, there was a day and a half when 5 or 6 CEOs from these big tech companies did come and were quizzed by Congress. It was embarrassing. I mean, if I were a congressperson, I wouldn't know much about this either, but the absence of good questions, so that the tech CEOs just dominated the conversation. So I don't think much is going to happen. It'll be it'll be talked about a lot, and it'll come up, and then it'll tail off, et cetera, et cetera. Going once. Must be a hand. I see a running.
Hello, Danny James, Compass Logistics and Marine. I'm a customs broker and international forwarder. When the pandemic started, we saw a lot of our industries and clients get square in the middle of the impact. But the PPE industry picked up, and we were bringing a lot of shipments from China. So my question is two parts. When do you expect that China's economy will surpass the U.S. economy? To let on to your previous point. And my second question is, it appeared that within about 3 months' time, as China supplied the rest of the world with PPE, they made back everything that we had gained from the actual trade war and tariffs.
Yeah, good observations. Obviously depends on growth rates and changes from here, but our projections are 10 to 15 years from now, China's GDP will be as big as that of the United States and growing faster. I'm reminded of your good set of comments and questions of Economist magazine last summer put a line something like the following: the West doesn't trust China, but because of its size has to find ways to do business with it. You know, somebody editorialized that and say, yeah, we got to find ways to do business with the devil. And, you know, I'm not going to say China's the devil, but we do have a lot of issues with them, but we're going to continue to trade with them. And you're absolutely right. They had a field day during COVID commercially at the expense of many other parts of the world. Wish I had better news. Anybody else? Got to end on an upbeat subject. Going once. Okay, as I concluded each of the last 2 years, this is really simple stuff. You just need to buy low and sell high.
All right, thanks again to Mr. Bob Dahl. Thank you again for joining us this year. Thank you to all our guests and the members of the execs and the planning committee. Great event, great turnout. Glad to see you guys here. Hope to see you again next year. Thanks and have a great day. Take care.